If there's one thing Kirby's known for, it's his appetite. Seriously, this dude will suck down just about anything you put in front of him. Truly gluttony incarnate. Which brings up the question of whether or not it's possible for Kirby to tamp down those appetites, at least for a little while. That's right, it's January, and our New Year's resolution is dieting, specifically an attempt at discovering the following. Is it possible to beat Kirby and the Forgotten Land without eating? Before we begin in earnest, we must define eating. The way I see it, eating can take two forms in this game. The first would be sucking up then swallowing anything. Most often enemies so as to get a copy ability. But, like I said, anything can be swallowed, more or less. To be clear, I'm fine with sucking things up and spitting them out. As anyone who's ever parented a toddler before knows, that doesn't count as eating your vegetables. Or, in this case, eating your anything. So long as we don't swallow, we haven't technically eaten, and therefore are perfectly fine. Additionally, we can use copy abilities if we can find a way to get them that doesn't involve sucking up and swallowing something. The second form of eating would be consuming food. So if there's food on the ground, or on a table, or hidden in dandelions somehow, we cannot touch those foodstuffs as that would cause Kirby to eat them, which would break the rules of the challenge. This does mean we basically have no way of healing in this challenge, but hopefully that won't be a problem. For now, let's get washed up on a beach and start fasting. We quickly find that this challenge is one of the few ones where the opening is fairly easy. Sure, we can't use any copy abilities or heal, but neither of those things really come up in this level, at least not mandatorily. What does come up is driving. Mouthful mode could potentially be controversial because, well, that name sort of implies eating, but I'd actually push back on that assertion, because the whole gimmick with Mouthful Mode is that Kirby attempts to suck up an object so large that he physically can't swallow it. Though based on previous experience, I do find the claim that he can't eat something as large as a car or traffic cone to be a bit, dubious. In any case, regardless of whether the laws of physics or a lack of motivation is at fault, the fact remains that Kirby doesn't ever swallow mouthful abilities, and therefore, they're legal. That makes this car section easy then, right? Well, I wouldn't claim it's super difficult, but it's certainly harder than normal gameplay has been thus far, for two main reasons. The first of which being the larger hitbox. Obviously, this makes it harder to avoid any food that is scattered on the ground. The second factor is the more limited moveset. You can't do things like hover when you drive. Trust me, I know. And that also makes dodging food a tad bit more difficult. But overall, this driving section doesn't have a ton of food laying around, so we get all the way to facing these dog things without any issue, where some cool slides prove to be just as effective as swords or bombs would have been. Next up, we head on over to downtown Grassland, where we quickly learn the lesson your dad, yes, your dad, wishes you learned sometime in elementary school. Don't mess with the dandelions! Oh, let me tell you, these devilish little weeds will not only scatter their seeds and infest your pristine lawn at the slightest provocation, they'll also, at least on occasion, reveal corn on the cob or watermelon or some other seemingly random food popping out of them like some gorilla soldier. So yeah, I mean, aside from having to unlearn that muscle memory, the level's not too bad. Though do make sure you don't fall into the corn trap. It's rough once you're in there. Next up, we head through the tunnel where this lone hot dog derails an otherwise fairly simple stairs section. Basically, you need to be the stairs to beat the level, but the stairs hitbox is so large as to make getting past said hot dog without eating it impossible. But not to worry, if you just stop being stairs for a bit and progress through the level as a normal Kirby, the stairs will magically stalk you, leading to pretty easy access once you do end up needing them. Rocky Rollin' Road did have me feeling left out since I couldn't eat food off a stump, or engage in levels shooting challenges. Luckily, those are just optional things you can do for Waddle Dees. But it does highlight that without the ability to switch copy abilities as easily, especially mid-level, we may end up missing out on quite a few Waddle Dees. That could be a problem if such limitations ever cause us to fall below the minimum threshold required to unlock a given world's boss fight. But for now, we seem to be on track. Speaking of being on track, or perhaps more accurately, on road, this driving section requires more caution than the previous one, but it is certainly possible. Next up is a trip to a Level Mall. Now, a significant portion of this level does take place in the food court, but most of the food there is actually plated properly and out of the way on tables, so no real issue here. And that brings us to the boss fight. Now, before we get into this, I'd like to address something you may have noticed in the footage thus far. Namely, that I've used several copy abilities over the course of this challenge. You may be wondering how that's possible without eating. The answer is actually pretty simple. While yes, eating is the most common way to get a copy ability, even including grabbing one from the weapons shop, there is a way to get copy abilities without eating. That way is by utilizing these copy essences, these little copy ability pedestal things that often appear in puzzle rooms as well as before or after boss fights. When one of these is around, you can run into it and get the ability, no eating required. Now that's not to say our life is all peachy once we have a copy ability, because given that we can't eat, if we ever lose the copy ability, we don't have the ability to suck it up and regain it. So we've got to be very careful when it comes to taking hits. That is certainly annoying, but especially in the context of boss fights, it doesn't do us nearly as much as you might think, because sucking up and spitting out these impact stars actually does a decent bit of damage. As it turns out, it's more than viable as a strategy, at least for this boss fight. The last area of the first level of the next world features a really annoyingly placed dandelion. But interacting with the ring at all, which is what puts you in this bind, is completely optional. There's nothing stopping you from just swimming across without a care in the world. The concrete aisles are relatively straightforward, though we do miss out on a fair bit of mole-based secrets at the end. And really, the rest of World 2 is pretty easy. As we enter the amusement park that is World 3, confections seem to become increasingly common. They're in boxes, on roller coasters, coated in sludge, etc. Additionally, Cutter may have been a poor choice of copy ability to use here, since it acts like a boomerang, pulling items of food back towards you with each attack. At least, if you targeted food, which hopefully you didn't, but easier said than done. Nevertheless, consideration, caution, and patience get us through level 1. Next up was a collection of perhaps the easiest driving sections we've faced thus far. But in the following level, lack of mobility as a light bulb followed by a vending machine paired with delicious food on narrow paths proves quite annoying. But after all the hardship, we do at least save all the hidden waddle-dees. From there, we take on the Parade and Clobber line, both of which are pretty easy tasks. World 4 isn't quite so kind. In particular, windy, freezing seas, gale force winds make it pretty easy to accidentally stumble upon a snack or dandelion. But I repeat myself. This boat section too is quite nerve-wracking with its larger hitbox and more cumbersome controls, as is becoming a theme with the mouthful modes. But sail carefully, and the level can be beaten. The Battle of Blizzard Bridge can be a bit annoying since if you take just a hit or two, you can end up losing your copy ability for an entire boss fight. But as it turns out, Kirby in his default form is actually pretty good at dishing out damage against bosses. We end up comfortably unlocking the King DDD boss fight, which doesn't make me even slightly peckish. That means it's off to World 5, the original Wastelands. And honestly, these levels here are quite easy to get through without eating. I'm now realizing that this challenge may indeed have an inverted difficulty curve. I can't scientifically prove whether or not this is the case, but it wouldn't surprise me if later levels in fact had less food in them to be tempted by. Given that less healing chances means levels get harder and you'll obviously harder later on in the game. In any case, I guess that means everything's smooth sailing then, right? Well, not exactly. Sure, getting through the levels wasn't too difficult, but my nonchalant romp through the world has left me short 2 Waddle Dees for unlocking the boss. But not to worry, I've got a plan. On my initial run-through of searching the Oasis, I missed quite a few Waddle Dees since I couldn't get a drill in the level without eating a mole. Now that I know I'll want a drill, I can preemptively get it from the DDD boss level, and just not get hit until I make it to where I need the drill copy ability. Along the way, I tried sleeping on a recliner to get a bonus Waddle Dee, but as it turns out, you do actually have to sleep in order to get the Waddle Dee. Like, literally eat this dude and get the sleep copy ability, so I guess we'll abort that plan. Luckily, the drill plan was fundamentally sound. even if it did require the slight annoyance of getting through the level while barely taking any hits. I was able to get my drill self to this room, where I cautiously dug up only the dirt patches hiding gems, just in case the other ones contained root vegetables or something of the sort, and ultimately, mission accomplished. But that's just one Waddle Dee. We need one more. And one more we can get by simply drilling under this fence, utilizing this water, then carefully hovering above this corn and milk. And just like that, it's boss time. I'll be honest, Silly Dillo isn't really much of an issue for our fasting ways to overcome. But what about Redgar Forbidden Lands? In general, things go quite well here, until this pipe mouth section. The issue is this squash thing, I think? Anyway, what's important is that it's food, so we can't touch it. That itself isn't much of an issue. The problem is that if you do jump over the food, you actually mess with your momentum enough to completely throw off the trajectory of your next jump. So over and over and over again, I ended up falling short on this jump. It seems that the game offers you a binary choice here of either eat or fall into a bottomless pit. So I guess we're just gonna have to pick the lesser of two evils here. Which, of course, is jumping over the food and then jumping again with perfect timing so as to clear the gap. Now you just gotta make sure you don't flub it on the roller coaster immediately thereafter, and there you go. Level complete. Next up is the Beast Pack's final stand, where once again a mouthful builder gives us a hard time. This time it's water. Basically, it's nigh impossible to navigate your bulbous watery body past these food rings. Luckily, taking the low road is actually an entirely valid, if slightly less fulfilling, strategy. And that is the last major hurdle before the game's final few boss fights, which, unsurprisingly, aren't really filled with food, leaving us with the conclusion that yes, it is possible to beat Kirby and the Forgotten Land without eating. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely check out my other challenge videos, including a bunch on Super Mario Bros. Wonder. You'll probably also want to subscribe so you can be notified of my future uploads. Oh, and if you really like what I'm doing here and want to support my work, as well as get some perks like getting early access to videos and voting on future video topics, consider joining my Patreon like these fine folks on screen. I'd especially like to thank my $15 tier patron, Ashvin Says. Or if you like tabletop gaming, consider checking out the card game I designed, Time Travel Entertainment Incorporated. But anyways guys, until next time, I've been CMeeCraft and I'll catch you in the next video. Goodbye.